Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Again, I'm Tanya Whiteside of the Whiteside Group, and this year we want to start something new with connecting and networking, and also hearing from individuals who have gone through things in life, either professionally or personally, but also that can share their experience of loss, but also of gain and any resources that they may have. Today we are here at Osa Coffee, and I'd like to thank Key. Key is the owner. Thank you, Key. And Mike, who's here for this wonderful space and giving us the opportunity to gather, to network, and share resources. Today our guest is Mayor Pro Tem Letitia Clark, and I'd like to read a few things about Letitia. Currently, she is the Chief Communications Officer in the South Orange County Community College District. Also, she is a council member elected to the Tustin City Council in 2016, and she also is a graduate and native of Tustin. She's very proud of Tustin. Go tell her, she says. And some of the things that she's responsible for, or that are some of her priorities, are communication, economic development, investment, innovation, public health, support of local education. As a council member, also, she served as mayor of the city of Tustin in 2021. But prior to that, she was Mayor Pro Tem during the 2020 calendar year, and I'd love to get your perspective on that. We know what was happening in 2020. A lot of things were happening during 2020. Governor Gavin Newsom appointed her as a council member to the Santa Ana Regional Water Quality Control District as well. She's just a champion for Tustin. She loves the youth. She created a lemonade stand entrepreneurship business for young people. She's affiliated with Boys and Girls Club. She's won lots of awards, and one in particular was the Obama Public Service, as well as other awards that she won. The most influential, there's another one that under 40. She's won that several times. But let's welcome Mayor Pro Tem Letitia. Thank you. And I would love for us as well to, we'll have some discussion. We'll also open it up for questions from our guests. And so I have a mic here for you. But thank you again for your time. So,
Testing, okay.
Oh, there we are.
Well, good morning. All right. I put my radio voice on.
Letitia, thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem. Tell us a little bit about you and how things are going.
Well, thank you for reading my bio. I appreciate that. It's hard to believe that so much has happened in my professional and personal life in such a short amount of time, kind of since COVID, really. But as you mentioned, I'm homegrown in Orange County. I'm third generation Orange County resident. So my grandparents moved here when they were 19 and 20 years old. My grandpa was in the Marines, and that's right. They moved from Little Rock, Arkansas to Orange County, California, and they thought that Laguna, and they landed in Laguna Beach. They thought it was heaven on earth. We live right by the ocean. But they didn't see many black folks walking around in Laguna, so every now and then they catch a glimpse of a family or two, and they actually lived on the street that only allowed black families to live in Laguna Beach on Ocean Avenue. And it was a street that was, many houses were owned by a black man, and it was one place in Laguna where black families could live. So it's very interesting, that history there. They tried to buy their first home in Huntington Beach, and they put down a down payment. A lot of it was over the phone, and they bought furniture and got approved and everything. And then when it was time to move into the neighborhood, whoever the homeowner association, and the details are a little muddled, but they were basically told that the quota had been met for black families in that neighborhood, and they were not allowed to move into that Huntington Beach neighborhood. And so my grandma, who is 90 now, she tells the story very casually as though it wasn't a big deal. And she said, yeah, we had to take them to fair housing court, and we won, and then we, eventually moved to Santa Ana. It's just like, Granny, this is a big deal, And you guys were able to overcome that and move on. And so, she couches it as, well, it's just what we had to do. But for me, being, somewhat of a leader in Orange County now reminds me of where I come from and the barriers that my family had to overcome, and nevertheless, they persisted and wanted to stay here in Orange County. So I'm very proud of the roots that I have here. So I mentioned that story because I'm not just someone who moved to OC and is trying to find my place. I have roots here. And so when I decided to run for office and people were looking at me and saying, you don't look like the other people who serve in public office, don't you feel a little out of place? Don't you feel uncomfortable because, one of these doesn't look like the other? And for me, it was, well, but I'm from here. But this is my home. And so if I don't feel like I belong, I can't imagine how other people who may look different but also have lived here for a long time, how they feel. So I want to be a voice for that part of the community. So, but yeah, went to Tustin High School, had a really great experience. We actually had about 10% African American population at Tustin High. And I mentioned that because I was very large at the time in Orange County, but it was because of the military presence in Tustin. We had a Tustin Air Base, and so that produced a lot of minorities and diversity, and so had a wonderful experience. But I was yearning for something a little more, so I decided to attend an HBCU, Historically Black College University. I attended Xavier University of Louisiana in New Orleans. And so I had a really great experience there as well. And I mentioned that because it was a very pivotal time. I was a fish out of water in so many aspects as well, not being used to being around all African American population. And so I kind of had to find my place there.
Yeah, that's an experience in itself.
It really is, coming from California and then coming from Orange County. But I did find my place and really learned about the call to excellence, the call that we have for each other to do well, and being held to very high standards and high expectations versus being able to stand out and almost being seen as an anomaly in high school. Like, oh wow, you're so smart, you're so articulate. Wow, look at you, being surprised by that. But then when I went to college, it was, well, of course you are. We all are. And that's expected, and you need to do more. And so it was like, oh, wow, I remember being held to very high standards, but a great experience for me. I thought I wanted to go to law school, but then I started working on some campaigns in New Orleans and for just extra money. And I started to see these flyers with these women on these flyers, black women, running for judge and senate and mayor. And I was like, wow, I didn't know this was a career option. And so then I, got more involved in the campaigns and started to learn about these women, and they were so accomplished and confident, and they, basically told me like, well, of course you can do this too. So I changed my major from pre-law to political science and public administration, and then I got an internship with the city of New Orleans right upon graduation. And I'm saying all this because all of this kind of led to probably the most pivotal time in my life where I was working for the city of New Orleans, and then Hurricane Katrina was coming up on the city. I was only about a year into a very low-level position. I was just getting donuts and coffee. I didn't have much responsibility, but I was happy to be there. I was like, I'm just happy to be here.
Hey, the donuts and coffee has
it led to something else. The storm was so, it was going to be so impactful. My boss at the time, who was a council member, called me at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and the storm hit, I think that Monday. She said, I don't care what you're wearing, get over here to City Hall right now. I don't care if you have on your pajamas. I did put some clothes on, but when I got to City Hall, there were many people in their pajamas and looking kind of crazy. There was no plan. There was no plan. Everyone was frantic. There had never been a mandatory evacuation in the city of New Orleans history. So very quickly, I went from low level to high level staff, and I was asked to stay. I was asked to, be on the ground, and so being there at that very pivotal time in a formidable time in my life, I was only 22 years old. It made all the difference in the world because I figured out that I could overcome very strenuous times. I could, withstand that storm, so to speak, but it also taught me the power and the value and the impact of public office. I saw people responding to those in need when the president was nowhere to be found. The governor was nowhere to be found. And it made me understand, oh wow, the people on the city council and the mayor, they really matter when it counts. And we kind of treat those offices as though they're lower offices. And people ask me all the time, when are you going to run for higher office? I'm like, well, I feel like I'm in high office right now because I've seen what the folks at this level have to do when there's a crisis, when there's an emergency. So that experience basically led to a career in government relations, and then that kind of morphed into communications. But I always knew that if I had an opportunity to move back home and live in the city that I grew up in, that I wanted to one day serve. And so about 4 years after I moved back, a seat became open on the council, and it was quote unquote open, but not really, because the folks in office had already picked who they wanted to fill the seat. So even though I was running, no one gave me permission to run for this seat. They was like, hold on, you gotta wait your turn. We have people already lined up that are supposed to be filling this position. But I didn't let that stop me, and had a lot of good experience. And what my opponents, the worst thing they did was underestimate me, because they had no idea my connections in Orange County. They had no idea my roots here. And so I was able to outraise them, able to outwalk them. And when I knocked on doors, when people asked me, are you a Republican or a Democrat? My first thing I said to them, because this is Tustin, I said, well, I'm a Tiller. And that's the mascot of the oldest high school in Tustin, where I graduated. They said, oh yeah, well, yeah, me too. And I'm like, well, we have something in common. And then that door opened a little wider. And, then we were able to have some common ground, even if we were different political parties. So with all that being said, I was able to win my first election, and then in 2020 I ran for re-election, and as you mentioned, I was Mayor Pro Tem at the time, so there was a lot going on with COVID, with George Floyd, with everything at that time. So, but I've been blessed, and the community has been amazingly supportive, and so we're just riding this leadership thing until the wheels fall off. We'll see what happens. Thanks. It's a long kind of introduction to some of your other questions.
Thank you so much. And so along the way, you being in Louisiana, Hurricane Katrina, did you have any influences, any individuals that were mentoring you, that kind of helped you in that process?
Yeah, I have an interesting take on mentorship, because I think sometimes we try to force mentorship sometimes, and we try to say, okay, you need a mentor, and we're going to link these two people up, even though they may not have any chemistry or connection. For me, along my life, I have just watched very intently. I say I have a leadership style that starts with listening. So, throughout my career, I have just tried to watch people that I'd like to emulate. I try to watch people to see what they do in tough times, and then, kind of take little bits and pieces that make sense for me. And so there's a lot of women and a lot of men in my life that have taught me very good lessons. And I can say probably my former boss, who was a council member, she used to tell me to have a short memory in politics. And I didn't understand that until I ran. And I had a lot of people that said that they supported me, but very quickly, kind of didn't want to ruffle any feathers and weren't there when I needed them. One good example, you came to my kickoffs reception, and I remember you saying, oh, what a neat place, and it was at a clothing shop, but that wasn't on purpose, because I was supposed to have it at another venue, and the couple that agreed to have my fundraiser we planned it months in advance, the day before they canceled on me. And they said, we're really nervous about your opponent, so we don't want to make him mad, so we don't want to be a part of your campaign anymore. And I remember just being so heartbroken and thinking, well, this is setting up the tone for the rest of my campaign. I'm not going to get the support that I need. but somebody came through at last minute and allowed me to have it at their clothing shop.
And it was nice.
Yeah, it worked out perfectly. But I always thought, what am I going to do when I see this couple at Target and at Starbucks and they, did me like this? And when I saw them, I just, was so pleasant and I had that short memory and they were shocked that I was nice. They were shocked that I was kind. And I remember feeling like I could hold my head up high when I walked away from that conversation. And I won in that scenario because I wasn't petty, I wasn't bitter. And I feel like they just felt like so little, and then look where I am now. And they could have supported me there early. Right. But I reckon and I recalled what that mentor in so many ways said to me, to have that short memory, because it wouldn't serve me any to hold the grudges and there's so many people in politics who do that. They just hold on to stuff and it winds up, I think, closing a lot of doors for them. So it served me well not to, just have a long memory and hold people to things that in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. And what a short memory does for me in terms of people, it reminds me that God is in control. Yeah. His plan, is what he has for me. So no person can get in the way with it. So it doesn't make sense to be mad with them for a long time and to hold those grudges. So that's just one example of ways that just a little piece of advice. You didn't have to be my mentor for my whole life, but I took that and I kept that, and I try to share that with others as well.
Thank you. One of my favorite quotes that I read from our former president, Barack Obama, in his book, The Audacity of Hope, he talked about being in those spaces with different political parties, but also that we have a stake in one another, and what binds us together should be greater than what tears us apart, because we want to get things done. We all want to do that, and if we could put those things aside, we would be able to accomplish more things.
Absolutely.
And Mayor Pro Tem, you were in office during a time that I didn't think would ever come, the pandemic, but also George Floyd.
Yeah.
Having that position, did you find yourself in a space where it was difficult to move things through office, to communicate?
Yeah, it was a difficult time, but I did immediately have all these triggers from Katrina, right? And so I could have kind of just stood still and not been able to move, but I felt very eager to act. And I just remember during Katrina, you just needed people to kind of get through the pain and the uncertainty and step up and be willing to lead. So I felt very comfortable in that space to do that then. However, it was tricky because I was Mayor Pro Tem, I wasn't mayor. And so Mayor Pro Tem is essentially like the vice mayor. I was supposed to be taking a second seat to the mayor, but the mayor was not stepping up at the time. He didn't know what to do. He was really committed to being more silent and just kind of waiting to see what was going on versus being a voice and letting the constituents know, hey, we see everything that's going on, we're developing a plan. And so I had to use some of my communication skills, and I started doing like live Facebook town halls, and not with an answer, but just getting people together and saying, we just want to kind of talk about what's going on, share resources. And I think it comforted a lot of constituents because they just wanted to know the leaders were paying attention, that the leaders cared enough to gather resources, but being silent just wasn't going to work. So I got a little flack from my mayor at the time because I was taking more of a leadership role as the Mayor Pro Tem. That all kind of changed though when the murder of George Floyd happened, because as the only black person on the council, the rest of the council was feeling very uncomfortable about saying anything, and then very quickly the narrative about the protesters was kind of dwarfing the magnitude of the killing. And so for me, I said, well, we have to say something, and we can do it in the right way. But no city had taken a formal position through like a resolution or a proclamation. So instead of asking staff, hey, why don't you draft something that we can consider, I drafted it. And I created all of the wording. Now, how would my colleagues go against what the only black person is saying we should say. And so I kind of took that privilege, and they wouldn't dare, kind of go against what I put in writing as what I thought we should make as a statement. So I made a very bold statement about how we are in support of peaceful protests, and just how devastated we were about what was going on. And so we wound up being the first city to pass a resolution. Almost every city followed suit. I was getting calls from every elected in Orange County saying, "Can we see a copy of the resolution? We want to do almost exactly what you did." We got us some coverage on the news. And so then all of a sudden, my mayor was kind of willing to take a back step and letting me, lead, and it wound up working out okay. But I had to be willing to lead. Yeah. And simultaneously, I'm feeling pain, right? As a black woman, I'm nervous for my son and my husband and my father, nervous about what this means, in the city. Also, there were several protests, and thankfully we didn't have any that were not peaceful, but I still had to take it from that perspective too. I can't be so engaged that I allow chaos to happen in the city. Some critics were saying that I was inviting, people to come to the city, and they said, if we have any looting, it's on your shoulders because now you're so public about the stance that we're taking as a city. So that kind of kept me up at night. But it all worked out in the end, and what I realized is that I had to be courageous in leading at that time. And it wasn't a silver bullet. It wasn't, guaranteed that everything was going to work out. But, just showing that courage, I think, is what leadership is about, and that's just kind of what I had to do at the moment. But I had to remember my time during Katrina, and it really did push me to just move forward, because I remember that we will get through this. There will be, another side of this coin that we will, we'll get through it. And had I not been through that, the vision of getting through something like what we went through may not have been as clear.
So with you mentioned triggers, you mentioned your family. During all of this time, have they supported what you're doing, or did you find it difficult to balance?
Yeah, my family is incredibly supportive, and I've tried to be as communicative with them about the realities of what goes into running for public office, helping them understand that you may be a victim to people's comments sometimes. And so I don't want to move forward with this without your buy-in, because you may find that you may be mentioned in the paper or mentioned in social media, and I have to know that you're okay with that. And it's the worst part of politics, because our families have nothing to do with our votes and et cetera. However, they get pulled into it sometimes. I think the scariest time I've had in public office so far is when I voted yes on bringing a temporary homeless shelter to Tustin. And a lot of people were not happy about us taking this leap, not just kind of putting a Band-Aid on it, but actually finding a solution. And starting a shelter meant there were going to be homeless people all the time in our city. And so some people were just not okay with that. The folks who weren't were saying that I was compromising their safety. So if I was going to compromise their safety, they were prepared to compromise my safety, which meant that they would, they wanted to know where my kids went to school. They would drive by my house. And so it was like a very uncertain time and a scary time. And most of them were idle threats all of them were idle threats on social media. But, I had to have real conversations with my kids, with, they weren't on social media at the time, but if they were, I probably would have told them, don't say where you are, don't include your location, those types of things. My husband wanted me to kind of have a police escort when I was walking out of the council meetings, and, that was his request of me, so I had to, ask that. And so, but they have been very supportive, and my exchange for that support is being very honest with them about what's going on, what I'm voting on, what could get people riled up, or what could be, something that people really support. So trying to keep them in the loop rather than just keeping them so separate where they don't know, what's going on with the council. But yeah, they've been very supportive.
I know you are very, very vocal on people voting, having that voice. What is something that you're working on right now?
So I think I'm most passionate about equity in terms of just seeing greater representation in government, and not just for parity, but to really offer those different perspectives, because I've seen the way votes turn, and every elected official, I think they're doing their best, but they're coming from a limited, set of experiences, and so they vote the way that how they know, but based on how they live. And so if they have had limited struggles or limited barriers, it's very hard for them to identify with people that live with struggle, day in and day out. And so we have to get more people that have lived, so to speak, in office, but it's so difficult because of the barriers that many elected officials don't get paid, a living wage. You have to either be independently wealthy or have a full-time job, which is also difficult. So then that shrinks the pool of people that can run. To run for office, it's extremely expensive. So either you have to be independently wealthy to self-fund your campaign, or you have to be beholden to so many groups to fundraise. Right. And then that also makes it difficult to make very bold decisions, when serving in office. So I'm just really passionate about seeing more people willing to lead, but creating a space where it makes it easier for them to run and then easier to serve. And so a lot of that means, some equity in pay for these elected roles, and even in the staff part. I started a program called Girls in Government, where we expose girls 8th through 12th grade to positions in city government, city manager, city planner, Parks and Rec director. And these folks, they make a good salary, and they're also helping the community, but no one told me about a city manager, in high school or college, and that, some city managers in California make close to $500,000 a year. You're like, you'd never know that. But they're the CEO of the city, essentially. So exposing them to these opportunities, because what I've noticed is it's a bench, just like many other things, and frankly, Caucasian men kind of get in that pipeline, and then they're just kind of there at the right place at the right time. An opening happens. Oh, what about Jake? He's been here for 5 years and he's been interning. He'd be great for assistant city manager. And then I'm kind of thinking, well, how did that happen? We didn't even open it up. But if we get more women, if we get more minorities just exposed to the opportunities, then there can be more of them at the right place at the right time and just kind of in the environment. So that's why I started that summit, and I think it creates more exposure. But yeah, really passionate about that equity piece. I wrote a book last year, a children's book called Mommy is the Mayor, and it was just about showing kids that a mayor can look like me. And it was amazing to go read to these classes and not even start reading the book and asking the little 5-year-olds, so does anybody know what a mayor does? And a lot of them did. What does a mayor do? Does anyone know? He does this and he does that. I said, oh, really? Yeah. And I said, do you guys think a mayor can be a woman? No. Wow. At 5 years old, they already have all these images, planted. And so my goal was to just unhinge that a little bit and then show kids that, American can be a woman, should be a black woman. American looks just like you. There should be no image that you have immediately for a leader in your city.
That's wonderful. And I know you and I have had conversations, and I was interested to know, do you feel pressure as a woman, minority, to represent everyone? Do you feel pressure?
Yeah, and I think it kind of started with the murder of George Floyd. The pressure started. Looking to me as one of the only black leaders in the county, that now I had to be the voice and the representation. What I've learned after that, because there's been several other, little pet things that people have wanted me to take on. One was some folks wanted to change the name of the airport, the John Wayne Airport, because they realized John Wayne had a lot of questionable behavior when he was here. But they said, you need to take this on. We need to change the name of the airport, and and I was like, well, That's not quite my fight. But I had to decide that that wasn't going to be my battle because I had other things to address, and I didn't want to lose the political capital that I gained in getting support for the other things that I was passionate about. But it was a good lesson that it's not my job to be the voice of all African Americans in Orange County, but it's also my job to step up when it's important, but I have to be able to discern that. Right. And so you and I were talking about, that's why I've realized there's a difference between having a goal and a vision. When I have a vision, then that means it spans beyond just kind of the temporary, oh yeah, this sounds good, and maybe I'll get more followers if I, get on Facebook or Instagram about this. But if I have a vision, then I say, well, that's not part of the long-term goal. Right. And so I've realized as an elected now, serving 2 terms, that it has to be greater than, you have to have some kind of, vision beyond just a platform. Right. You have to have a passion around creating legacy that goes beyond your service, because there will be a time where you won't be in office, but what do you want? What do I want to see around the city for? I have a 16-month-old. What do I want him to see in Tustin, and me be able to say, yeah, I had a hand in that for decades to come. And so, it's not about being short-sighted, but I think when I feel that pressure from the Black community or other, people of color, communities, that I have to, think about the long-term goals, the vision, and, just fight my battles accordingly. Not every battle is necessary for me to take on.
And I think for a lot of us, we may find ourselves in the workplace being the only one, always be the one they come to that ask certain things or not, or make assumptions about what we're doing. But I appreciate what you said is, I don't represent everyone. And believe it or not, I can't dance. Everybody thinks I can dance. I can't dance. I stopped dancing when the Cabbage Patch came out. I got it. I can't get my shoulders to move like that. And so I appreciate what you're sharing. Is there anything that you can share with us about leadership roles and representation that we could use to?
Well, I think that we can use representation as a way to, kind of get a foot in the door. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if you're looking to create more diversity in spaces where you don't see it, you can be that person. I think we talked about kind of tokenism. It can kind of start as you being a token, but then what do you do with that platform once you're there? What do you do, when you're in a room, do you speak up? Right. When you're...
and why are we seen as angry if we do speak up?
And then if you see someone else that looks like you, like, another minority, do you empower them? Do you encourage them? So that we're not just kind of doing things that are self-motivated, but we're creating a safer space where even if you do speak with authority, when there's more people that look like us, then maybe it won't be seen as being angry. It's just seen as being powerful. But changing the narrative can really only happen when you get, buy-in. But it's I think it's okay to create that diversity and say you're the only one for the time being, but to be very purposeful in creating, spaces for people that look like you or have similar perspectives as you for diversity's sake. But then the challenge is, what do you do once you've kind of met that diversity quota, going beyond and thinking big picture. So I think some of us kind of get stuck in, okay, I've gotten in the room, that's enough. I'm at the table, that's enough. Then what do you do with it? And then how do you expand it? And then how do you create longevity? So I think that's where leadership comes in, where it's just not enough for you to get the position. It's just not enough for you to be appointed or selected or elected. What do you do long term after you get there? And then create space for more people that look just like you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to open it up for questions from our guests. Yes, you have a question.
So you talked a little bit about, I think I'm probably laughing. You talked a little bit about fear
And I know myself and most women in particular that I speak to, we do have fear, and sometimes it stops us from making those bold decisions. Can you speak a little bit to how you overcome fear? What do you do to make sure that fear doesn't have a voice in your decisions?
I've kind of settled into being comfortable with the uncomfortable. I have come to grips with most things that are, I don't know how to say it. Most things that are seen as impactful or important are just hard. And the reason they're exceptional is because it's hard for a lot of folks to do. So I just kind of live in that, you know, a lot of things are not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty and, you know, discomfort, but it's very short-lived because once you can kind of get through that, then, you know, things just kind of start to open up. I've just seen it happen too many times. Also, I've tried to take things that I think the world and society might see as a liability, like being a woman or being a mom or being black or being short, you know, all these things that some people would think is a liability. I just think about it as a level up. You know, this is my way of showing you that I can withstand adversity. This, even to myself, I know that I can multitask. I know that I can overcome, you know, tough times. I know that I can do a lot of difficult things at the same time. So I have to tell that to myself, like, this is not a liability. This is my level up. So when I walk into a room, there are all these folks that have never been through anything, that have never had any real challenges, and I've had several that I've overcome and succeeded nevertheless. So I have to tell myself that sometimes, and it just helps me hold my head a little higher. It helps me have a conversation with someone that, you know, may seem like they're out of my league or, you know, that is not on the same level or whatnot. It just allows me to be more comfortable in that space. But there's so many times when I walk into a room, I don't know anyone, I feel out of place, but I break through that, you know, 30 seconds of discomfort and uncertainty and then just press forward. And it's amazing with the partnerships and the relationships that I've been able to make just because I was okay in being in that space and not letting other people see me sweat, not letting them see me, you know, oh my God, you know, going in the corner. But it shocks them sometimes how comfortable I seem and how I see sometimes on people's face like she's just talking at the table. She's not even nervous, and I can see them kind of amazed that and even if it's inside, I don't let it show, and I know that it gives other people permission if they're sitting with that fear and living with that fear when they see me, you know, at least on the in my outward appearance break through that, it gives them permission to do that. So then that makes me feel better too. But yeah, and I tell my kids this too, like there's a lot of things that are hard. You know, when you're playing sports and, you know, it gets really hard, like it will continue, but you'll never see the greatness if you don't get through some of these hard parts.
Right.
And just a lot of things are hard, you know, and it's hard to
level up.
Yeah, but you just have to see it as this is my way of proving to myself that I can get through hard times, and then the high, the amazing, you know, like euphoric experience that you have when you get through something really difficult and it goes your way, and then there's nothing like it.
Great question.
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Karen.
No, I think I'm okay. I'm gonna get a little personal about Laguna history. That Laguna Beach Black history. Is it documented anywhere? Because I'm fascinated.
Funny enough, there's a book that was just published, I think last year, about the history of Orange County, and there's a whole chapter that's called Blackballed, dedicated. I'll find the author. I'll give it to Tanya so she can share it. But the author actually talked with me, and we got deep about my grandparents' history here. But he mentioned all kinds of things that I never knew. There was going to be a black beach club in Newport Beach. They were building it. They were going to have, you know, Duke Ellington and all these famous jazz artists in Newport Beach. It got burned to the ground before it could open. And it's documented that they were members of the KKK within the fire department. And so when it was burned, for whatever reason, it wasn't salvaged. And so the author notes that that was no coincidence. You know, the doors never opened. So, you know, little things like that. And then, yeah, there's a lot of actually Black history in Orange County. And I don't know if you've ever been to our we have a Black History Parade every year here in Orange County. It's the first Saturday of every in February every year. And I think a couple years ago was, I don't know what anniversary it was, either the 20th or the 30th anniversary, but so much history about Black leadership here in Orange County. And I think there was a very strong Black community, enough to where it kept my grandparents here, even though it would have been, you know, kind of geographically spread out, that it kept them here. And I mean, I see some church members here, Connie and I go to, we go to one of the largest Black churches here in Orange County. It's still thriving. So, yeah, you know, they definitely experienced some adversity, but there had to have been enough of a community that embraced them and supported them and helped them to stay here, and enough where my dad decided to stay here and raise his family. And, you know, even today, there's enough keeping me here to raise my family. So it's there, but it's a very interesting history. But I'll get the author to you.
So in positions of leadership, sometimes I struggle with my reaction to like negative comments or microaggressions. So how do you deal with that? Because as a young leader, that's very hard for me to control. Because
Is it identifying that it's actually a microaggression, or do you feel like, you know, like, was that shade? Was that?
Yeah, and
were you trying to?
I have to call it out every time.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, what are you trying to do? And
Right.
like, should I have said anything? Because I don't want, you know, that angry Black.
Yeah, chip on your shoulder type stuff. Yeah.
You're gonna hear about it.
Yeah, I think that short memory thing kind of comes into play. I've experienced a lot of microaggressions from my colleagues on the council, not so much for racial things, more about being a woman. A lot of comments about my stature, a lot of comments about, you know, like what I'm wearing, and I know deep down they don't mean something super like grotesque about it, but it's inappropriate like 90% of the time. It's just why I never talk about how tall you are or what you're seeing, you know, never. And so, and then even little things like not calling me council member or Mayor Pro Tem, you know, reducing it to a nickname like, hey LC, or hey, you know, and just kind of minimizing my leadership. But I've decided not to call out everything, but think about, what do I need their buy-in for something bigger that's going to create a safe space not only for me, but for other women? Because if they're doing this to me, they've got to be doing it to staff and constituents. And so I think that's why I didn't call it out every time, but I need your support for this funding for this Girls in Government Summit. And when it's time to write a resolution, I'm going to write it, and I need 100%, you know, approval. You know, I need this to be unanimous. So again, thinking about the long-term game. So you will continue to be offended by the microaggressions if you don't have a long game, if you don't have a plan. Get that plan in place. Think about what's my big goal here at work? What am I trying to achieve? Do I want to start a diversity committee or equity and inclusion groups? Or, you know, but I know I'm going to need that support. Think about doing things like that, and it will allow you to take up the battles that make sense, but not feel like you have to fight everyone, because you'll have a goal in mind. You'll have something that you can, you know, eventually count as an accomplishment or a success. So I think that's how I get through it, but I hear you. There's so many times, again, I'm just like, wait, what was that? Did I miss that? I think, yeah, you're trying to offend me right now, yeah, so I hear you.
You mentioned that the biggest mistake when you were running for office was your point of underestimating. What do you say to that person who may be underestimating themselves on the chain that they can do as an individual?
Oh, wow, good question. Yeah, I mean, if you are, I would say, start, if you have a habit of kind of underestimating what you can do, start thinking about the people that you surround yourself with. Because if everyone in your life, every time you mention a big dream or a big goal or something that's very aspirational, and they're like, oh, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do all that work? That sounds so hard. Or so-and-so has never been able to accomplish that. Why do you think you can? Start changing your circle. Start thinking about who you're around. Because what I enjoy, and I know I'm around the right people, is when I say something that's really bold, and people are like, yeah, do it. Why not? And I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe I can. You know, I was like, oh, maybe I'll be president one day. Okay, just let me know when. I gotta keep you around, you know, but not somebody said, oh, yeah, you'll never do that. Start thinking about changing your circle, and your belief in yourself will change. But I encourage you to put that in the atmosphere. Put that out there that you want to do big and grandiose things, and then it's just a plan. There's just steps that have to be taken to, you know, accomplish those big goals. But yeah, I think if you're in the habit of underestimating yourself, that you really do have to get a village around you that encourages you and that will help you kind of realize that you can do big things. And then when you're around people that do big things also, your big things won't seem like such a big thing. But when folks are doing small things, even something that's very average will seem too monumental for them. So not that you gotta, you know, cut people off, but make sure you surround yourself around people who believe in you, who believe in themselves, and believe that hard things can be done. You know, so that would be my advice to anyone. Yeah.
It's a two-parter, I would say. First question is, what are you reading? What do you read to continue or to keep yourself motivated, encouraged, inspired? And then B portion of that is, what leaders do you follow? Present day leaders. Do you follow them either on social media or you are reading things that they've written? Just wondering what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, I like that. So I do look at a lot of social media. I look at speeches. I like to look at people making speeches. One, because it's very, it meets the moment. You know, I see how people react in a very, you know, timely discussion. I watched Hakeem Jeffries' speech several times that he made on the House floor. He became minority leader. Just seeing what he did to show grace, poise, but still be strong and powerful, and, you know, call out injustices, but also encourage people and thank people in that moment. You know, just taking notes of how you deliver strong words, because words matter. And so I really like to look at speeches of current leaders and, you know, past speeches. Right now I'm reading this book called Are You Okay Really by Jenna Kutcher. She's kind of like a mom influencer. It's about checking in on yourself, because we kind of always ask everyone, how you doing? How are you doing? But when do we ask ourselves, how are we doing? And then, how are you really doing? So she offers all these segments in her book about how to authentically check in with yourself and how to notice kind of like when you're off and being just okay, giving yourself permission to sit in those questions and sit with being okay if you don't have an answer right away. So I kind of like reading encouraging things like that. I've been reading a lot of working moms who are juggling it on. I follow this woman. She calls herself the mama attorney. She gives advice about how to legally navigate through the workplace as a woman, and particularly after childbirth, and all of the loopholes that we don't know about how to protect yourself and getting more time at home, or getting time to do the things that you need to do in the workplace, like breastfeed and take breaks, and all of the loopholes in insurance to get mental health coverage, all these things. So I follow her a lot because I'm writing a new book. It's going to be called From the Baby's Room to the Boardroom, and it's all about how we utilize tips as moms that we can utilize those lessons in the workplace, and so that we don't have to leave our full selves from our home life to when we work. So following folks that kind of help inspire the rest of that writing. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Well, man, our time, well spent. We can keep talking, but as we come to a close, could you share any advice, especially with our audience, our young adults, and those who are still aspiring in our professional careers, be it we have authors, we have other budding authors
Yes, I know
out
that.
there as well. Any advice you could share?
Yeah, I would just say, when life kind of gives you some tribulations, I mean, prayer always works for me. But I really encourage you not to just sit and wallow in it, but to really, if your goal is to lead, if your goal is to do something greater, if that's not your goal, then, maybe it's okay to wallow. But I'm going to say, if you want greater, do not wallow for too long. Try to tap into what the lesson is. And even the hardship is you're going to be able to get through it easier if you're saying, okay, there's a lesson here, and what do I want to be able to say after I've gotten through this? How I managed it, what I did in response, how I encouraged others, what I learned from it. And that might be your next book. That might be your next speech. That might be the next thing that kind of propels you to start something new at work or in your community. So looking at a hard time as something that's just happening to you, but the next lesson that you need to be able to eventually, do some amazing and great things. And I say that because I think every really hard time in my life has eventually unlocked something greater, because I was either willing to talk about it later, and I realized it freed some other people or gave them permission to, still do great things even though they've gone through something hard. Or, I really did learn something from it about myself. And so, I just say lean into that. Don't wallow in misery. We all go through really hard things, but if you can learn from it and just see the long-term vision of you as a leader, what happens after that struggle, you really do some amazing things. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. This is so great.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful moderator.
We want to give away 3 of your books. I brought mine
nice.
in there. So if you don't have the blue ticket there, Desiree is coming around to make sure you get one. I've got a few over here.
Everyone have one? No.
They have one, put them in the thing there. We're gonna give that away, and then we also have, again, thank you, Key, for
Yes, thank you.
opening up your
Beautiful thing.
Yes, love your space. We also have some coffee giveaways and a few other things that we'll do. And will you sign the book?
Of course, yes, of course.
All right. You ready? No, you're gonna do it.
2493202.
I know it. All right. Yeah. Okay. For the next one.
2493206.
Yeah. Okay, and then also again, Key, this spot, AOSA. Can you tell us what AOSA stands for?
Thank you. So ASA started kind of more showcasing sustainable brands, and so we were a retail store, And a lot of our mission was giving back. So we were one of the first stores to carry Toms, Crochet Kids, a lot of the brands that now are really well known for being one for one. And what changed is we noticed the need for the community to be able to have a place to be able to come together, have conversations, hang out. And so we transitioned into a coffee shop. And so since then, our original name was Art of Sustainable Action because we focus on sustainability. But within everything that happened with COVID and a lot of conversations that I was having, as well as a female Black business owner in a coffee shop where everyone's just like, I'm gonna go somewhere, I'm gonna go get coffee, and that's the only place I can go because food is allowed to be a thing. To where I just noticed a lot of the conversations we were having where I was like, like sustainability is still at our core, but ultimately what I would like for us to be known for is the conversations we have. And so we shifted to being Art of Social Action. And so that's kind of now what our new name and rebranding is.
And so we have some giveaways here. We pull two.
2493200.
There's one. All right, next have a copy on it.
Right.
All right.
I went to two church services last night.
He cut his hair.
2493209.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah!
Let's say something.
And how many birthdays on the table? 3?
yeah, there's
Okay, so as an author myself, my most recent publication is a coloring book called I'm More Than My Hair, and it has self-affirmations in the book. One of the things that was near and dear to my heart are young people, and probably about 10 years ago, I met a young lady who said, Miss Whiteside, you're going to mentor me. I'm going to be in your office all the time. And she happens to be here, Desiree, who's now a college graduate. One of my students in high school. But also, they inspired me. And so being able to help other young women who see people like them, being able to share and giving them words of encouragement and affirmations. And so on the cover, it is Desiree. She's on the cover with a few of the other girls who inspired the coloring book. And so I would like to give away, how many do I have on the book? 2. Okay, so that's what it is.
2493210. One more. 2493211.
That's perfect. And another book, especially I know you talk again about triggers and loss and going through experiences and then also being able to share to help others. I was a victim and witness to a murder-suicide of really good friends, and I believe that it was not an accident that I was there. They were great friends. I lived through that situation, and the Lord, when I asked why did I live? Why didn't, I die? And the Lord just said it wasn't your time. But I feel like I was prepared for that. But in my journey of healing and rebuilding, I published a book called Rebuilding Life After Trauma, and I share about my experiences of going through that and what it was like to feel like I went through like a natural disaster. We know that at any time in California we can have an earthquake, but it was the same thing in life, that I went through that traumatic experience. I feel like the Lord brought me through, and I wanted to be able to share with others that going through traumatic experiences, you do have an opportunity to rebuild your life. And so I'd like to give that book to someone.
2493203. Before you give it to me, I already hold it. So
Okay.
$249-3203.
Oh,
249-3206.
I know she's got it too.
I already have it already too.
You would have okay.
Trina,
Yeah, is there anybody that doesn't have it in here? First of all. Is anybody that doesn't have this one? I'll have this. Oh, okay.
Okay.
You have it?
but Trina does
The
it.
one on here doesn't have this? Please finish.
Well, listen, thank you all so very much for coming out today for coffee and connections. It's been my vision for a while. It was probably 10, I don't even know how many years ago. Mayor Pro Tem Clark had an event in a coffee shop, and it was so fun, and I remember saying, oh, that is so neat. I'd love to do that. And so I really, as well, had a thought of people coming together and networking and hearing from others where we're able to pour into each other. And so I just want to thank you for being my first guest. And we're going to do this quarterly. I'm excited about our next guest that we're going to have. We'll be here in April, if everything goes well. And then for the Whiteside group, we do have some other things coming up. So if you are not following us on social media, please follow us. We're on Facebook as well as Instagram. And I want to thank you again for coming out. And thank you again for having us. And will you sign your book? Okay, show sign. Thank you guys so much.